What's up, YouTube? This is Greg from Greg's Tutoring NYC at gmail.com. We're going to have a discussion about how to prepare for the SHSAT in 8 weeks, or any test for that matter. I'm just heading off to the park right now, and we'll do a little sit and talk and walk and talk and talk and talk. So what we're going to talk about is there's about 8 weeks until the SHSAT today. And what we're going to look at is just an overview of how to approach it if you were taking it under these circumstances. There's an argument that there's only 8 weeks left. I'm being stopped. I'm being sent over here. There's only 8 weeks left, and let me make sure I can get out of here without getting killed. There's 8 weeks left to the SHSAT, and there's not enough time to prepare and study and things like that. And in truth, there is. There really is. So we're just going to explore that a bit and see where we can go with that kind of idea. And I'm going to pull over in a second so that we can be a little more coherent. I'm going to attach a little blurb with this, a little explanation that you can download later. Depending on how this video ends up or not, I may actually put it alongside the video as it's playing. I have to see how much video editing I normally do. Most of my streams are normally live, as you guys know, if anybody's watched my channel at all. I almost never do edited stuff, which at least shows my authenticity, okay? But it takes so much time to prepare these things and so much time to edit them that it becomes a really huge chore. And I'm doing this at my own cost, etc., etc., etc. So we'll figure that out on the flip side of this, what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make the associated document along for you guys. So there's 8 weeks until the SHSAT. There's about 2 months, and there is a way to split this up so that you can get a pretty coherent, logical approach to doing this. Now, because some people say no, you can't do it. I've tutored kids through this and so on, and you might say, well, you're a tutor, you know what you're doing, yada yada. That's true, but I also help hundreds of kids through email and hundreds of kids online who are doing this solo. That said, if you're failing every test, this is not going to be a good choice for you to make. Okay, so that needs to be clear. You need to be probably about an 85 and above student. Okay, there is a truism that happens here, which is that a lot of middle schools suck, and they suck so much that they don't teach the kids the material. All right, so that's one of the issues a lot of kids have to contend with, which is that there's no thing to do. All right, I'm going to flip around here and just park along the side of this park here. I live in Queens, so I live near Forest Park, so I'm just going to hang out here. Oh, there's actually a spot here. Okay, so give me 1 second to park, and then we will figure that out. Okay, this guy is not letting me move up, bro. Okay, there we go. I'll park, and then maybe we can get a little scenery. I can maybe walk for a while at this point. Let's see how it goes. And I'm hoping the air conditioner is not too loud. In fact, I'm going to lower it at this point, because what I don't want to do also is to do this whole YouTube a second time. All right, so we're going to have a sit and talk today. I know I'm really beautiful, but how about I flip the camera? Actually, I don't know if it's going to let me flip the camera. Can I do that? No, I can't. All right, so let's just get some high-level things out of the way, and I'll hold up a piece of paper when it's appropriate at the thing. So the first question is there enough time to even figure this out and do this? And the answer is yes, there is. But again, if you're a failing student, this doesn't make practical sense. Again, you need to probably be an 85% and above to really be able to pull this off in any reasonable sense of the way. And even if you're in a good middle schools, and I'm picking 85 out of a hat a little here, but middle schools grade different ways. So an 85 at one school might actually be 100 in another, and an 85 in another school might be an 80 in another. But you want to be in the top X% of your class for this to make sense. And if you're at the lower end of the 85 here, if you're a 100 student, this is probably a shoe-in for you. If you're an 85% student, you may have some challenges to be able to get through this in this 8-week duration. And this year we kind of had the benefit that COVID is around, so that means you're even if you have in class and you're doing hybrid or remote, let's get serious. Class is not going to be 100%, and class is really not. First of all, they moved it to September 16th, and it's really not going to start till October. So there's a lot of weeks here, and you had a lot of weeks over the summer to do this. You also had at the end of last year. So we're talking forward thinking here, though. So there's definitely enough time. The question is now, how much time? Well, first of all, put some time in. Now, there is a lot of kids who can just roll out of bed and pass this thing. They're geniuses. They're experts. They've probably gone to tutoring centers for years. They have a tutor already. They've gone to boot camps, all this kind of stuff like that. So we're not really talking about a kid like that. We're talking about a kid who just, let's say today decided, okay, I'm interested in a specialized high school. I never heard of them before, whatever the reason is. There's still 8 weeks. You still have enough time. Okay, you really do. Again, the test is not about science. It involves writing, but you don't have to write. It doesn't involve other languages like Spanish and French. It doesn't involve social studies and things like that. Yes, you do need to know certain things about the world. So if it talks about a quarter, I mean, you have to assume the scientific aspect that is metal. And if it talks about George Washington, hopefully you know that he was the first president and so on. All right? So the question is, how much time do I need to put in? Well, I can't answer that. I would need to sit with you and do an analysis of that with you. But if you think you're going to put in an hour a week, that's ridiculous. Okay, you're not going to make it unless you're the genius kid. And if you put in 10 hours a day, that's probably too much. Okay, that's a whole full day where you're just concentrating, and there's a line in the sand. We like to talk about bell curves and exponential things and so on. There's a line where things don't make sense anymore. Okay, especially for kids your age, your brain's still developing, yada yada yada. So it's only really the kid and the outlier kid who can do it with the stamina of that, because you also want to weigh this against everything else in your life, meeting your friends, even if it's online, playing a game, doing video stuff, doing things with your family, just resting, listening to music. That's all important. So it means the psychological aspects of preparing are just as important as the nitty-gritty aspects of preparing. Okay, so I like to set a baseline, and again, it's about a kid of 14 hours a week. So that means 2 hours a day. So you can do it 2 hours in a swoop, or you can do an hour in the morning and an hour later. Some kids, again, can just roll out of bed and just pass this thing without even thinking. They can think it when they're half asleep, groggy. Other kids, you need to have slept well. You need to be exercising well. You need to have no other focus. Like if you're gonna study and go right to sports team practice, you're probably worrying about the sports team practice and getting there in time. So try not to piggyback things that are kind of important to you before or after it, so that you're truly focusing for the hour or whatever you're going to spend on it. Okay, so there's stuff like that. So I would say baseline is 14 hours. You could bump it up to, normally if you went to class, you would be in class from 8 to 3, right? So that's 4, that's 7, that's 6 hours if you take out lunch. So you're normally studying 6 hours a day. Okay, but at least sometimes you're changing classes, you're seeing classmates, you are stopping for lunch, things like that. So 6 hours is not unreasonable, especially if you break it up into 2 pieces. You wake it up 8, you go to 10. Okay, you take a 2-hour break, you go from 12, you go to 2. This is after you eat breakfast and lunch, obviously. You go to 2, or you eat lunch at 2. You wait till 4, and you work till 6. So you can get 6 hours a day doing that with enough break time, enough downtime. Go for a walk, just go take a nap even. Although for some kids that's not a good thing to do. You can wake up, have groggy, and so on. So however you divvy it up. And what's just as important is to stay consistent. Don't do this one day and then a week later. Don't do this one day and 4 days later. You have to make a routine and a pattern, which is what you're doing is training yourself. That's part of your prep, is to train yourself to be consistent. And you don't want to fall out of favor with the topics. If you kind of just learned exponents and you just got them, don't leave them there. You need to still work on exponents. Okay, because if you come back to exponents in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or even 3 days later, it's probably all gone through your mind. I mean, who hasn't sat through a lecture or watched a YouTube or been in class and yes, and when you get home to do the homework, like, what the heck was the teacher talking about? And it's not even complicated questions. It's the same kind of stuff. All right. So there's things like that. Figure out your timing, and it doesn't mean you have to do this every day. It might mean that you skip a day. You do a whole full day. I just gave you the example of 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. It might do that. You pretty much do it 7 hours straight. You do breakfast, do 7 hours straight with lunch in the middle for half an hour. And then the next day you don't do it at all. Again, but be consistent. So if you go on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, that's cool. And there's other techniques that people use. For instance, like every Sunday, take a practice test. So that you have a duration between there to learn the material and then take the test in the morning, grade it in the afternoon, and then start looking at the stuff by then for the rest of the day. So there's a whole bunch of different strategies here that you can use. All right. So there's all of that. So there's figuring out, being consistent in your timing. The other is try to understand your test you're taking. I'm talking about this for the SHSAT right now, but everything I'm going to say really applies to every test that you can take. Understand what that test is about. Again, the SHSAT doesn't have science on it. So don't study science. If you want to study science, do it on your own, but don't study science for the SHSAT. Also study with purpose. On the flip side, the SHSAT is about specific things. Don't study other things. Okay? The SHSAT doesn't go into advanced trigonometry. It never did. It never will. So don't study advanced trigonometry. Same for geometry. Or geology. Or geography either. Just go to do what you need. The overall tenet of the test is that you need to know all of grade 7 and all of grade 8. Okay? There is a little more you need to know. Now, some of you might say, I know that. Well, first of all, you may have gone to a sucky middle school, as I already told you. So then you don't know all of it. And the other that I get with kids is I tell them, make sure you know all your prerequisites. Make sure you can ace the SAT test. Oh, I got like a 3.9. That means you didn't master it. If you didn't master the grade level stuff, how can you master the more complicated SHSAT stuff? Even though it's still a grade 7 and grade 8. Right? The state test is basically testing what you memorized in your core knowledge. The SHSAT's going up a level there. It also tests that same thing, and then it adds another stuff. So that's the point of the SHSAT. That's why you're taking the SHSAT. That's why they're not using your classroom grades, and that's why they're not using your state test grades. Because the SHSAT is a different beast. You got me? You got me? Yeah! Come on. So know that your prerequisites well, because they're the basis of everything that's going to happen here. I like to tell kids, know your fundamentals, know your core stuff. And they think I'm talking about second grade stuff. No, when I say know your fundamentals, if you were talking about exponents, know every single freaking thing about exponents. Everything. Backwards and forwards. Right? Take something simple like the multiplication table. Some of you still don't know the multiplication table. And some of you memorize it in a certain order. You should be able to do it randomly. You want to be fluid. Your numeracy. There's lots to talk about literacy, but what about your numeracy? You want to be a master of everything. You don't want to make silly errors. If you're making silly errors, you haven't mastered the material. And you say, no, I was just off by 1. Yeah, and what about the other 5 problems you did it? And the number of kids who don't meet the cutoff score because of silly errors is actually enormous. It's enormous. okay, on any test. And it means you haven't mastered it. It means you're not fluid enough in the topic or the subtopic to be able to do it. Because if you're making careless, silly mistakes, that ain't good. No, it's just a silly error. You know what? The next time you get really sick and your doctor misdiagnoses you, you can have a laugh with your doctor when I made a silly error, right? No, you can't do that, all right? So it's no good. The other kind of top level thing is read. Read! Always read! Literature is important. Whether it's history, newspapers, comics, the internet, whatever it is, the more you read, the more the correlation is that you're going to be a better reader. And that includes bumping up your vocabulary. And you can read just for the sake of enjoyment of it, but you need to sometimes stop and be like, what was this about? What did the author really intended here? And sometimes it's not about anything. You know, talk about Seinfeld, a show about nothing, okay? It could be something like that, all right? It could be something like that. So that's the kind of thing you want to figure out. Okay, so whether you studied or not, whether you've been studying for years, since COVID happened, or since the last day of school, so you did it through the summer, whether you went to a boot camp, whether you're going to a tutor center, whether you have a tutor, whether you're doing this solo, today is the day to reset yourself and kind of start over and kind of get a grip on where you are. Because many of you can do this. You just never had a task like this before. So all of this process is foreign to you. Okay? Also, like I said, there's a lot of sucky middle schools. And if you, for instance, never... Okay, I'm back. I just turned off notifications. I'm bleached out there. So, let me see if we can get this a little better so it's lighting better or something. Okay, there we go. So you need to reset yourself. And if you need to, get external help, even if it's just one time. Now, I'm a tutor, so I'm biased here, but I notice a lot of kids, especially after they've taken the test, I wish I knew this, I wish I knew that, I wish I knew this. And here's what one of the issues are. It used to be that you never used to prep for a test like this. You didn't study, you didn't go to a tutor or anything. Testing has changed over the years, especially since the No Child Left Behind Act. And it turns out that a lot of people tutor now. Used to be something just for the wealthy, just whatever. It's not that way anymore. So it's to your benefit to seek out tutoring if it's at all possible. I know for some families it's not. And that's why I do a lot of these free YouTubes. Okay? I have hundreds of hours of YouTubes on my channel that talk about the SHSAT and related things. So you actually have a whole coursework sitting there if you want it at your availability to learn the material. It may not be organized perfectly because I do this ad hoc just like this now, but in the event it's all there. And I go over whole SHSATs, page by page, question by question. Really, I go through just everything, okay? So here you are, and here's the other thing. If you don't get outside help, somebody else is. Okay, and you might say that's not fair or whatever. The truth of the matter is, that doesn't mean they're better off than you, but they probably learned a few things that you're never going to learn. And I don't even mean math or ELA wise. Something about pacing and strategy and things like that. And that, again, that's why I do this YouTubes. But in the event, again, even if it's just for a session or two, towards the end, and we're getting towards the end, so now may be a good time to do it. So let's jump right into stuff. So week one, we're at week one now. Okay, tomorrow, Sunday. Learn about the test, learn about tips, read about high-level strategies, things like that. Because at the end of the day, you're not just taking a math and ELA test. You're taking a standardized test, and there's ways that you can do things to bump up your game about how to be more efficient in answering questions and so on. That goes beyond math and English. And again, as I said earlier, and I say all the time, the test is also psychological, that you're pacing, you're beating the clock, and all this other kind of stuff like this. And you want to be able to be comfortable by the time test day comes. So what we're going to do is break all this down and piecemeal it out so that within the 8 weeks, you can do this. And the beauty of this 8-week thing, by the way, is that not only have I helped kids do this, both who were my students and also through email and stuff like that and online, it's possible. Okay, but this can be extended out. So if you have another test, apply this to another test. If instead of 8 weeks, you have 3 months, then do it. If you have 6 months, do it. So it's still the same kind of approach where you're taking this thing and splitting it up into simple pieces. It's called divide and conquer. There's also KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. So you're taking something that's a big chore and you break it down into little pieces. But you have to do it simultaneously as well. So in addition to doing the test tips and the high-level strategies, and they're all over the internet. Some are bad, some are good. There's the YouTubes. I have YouTubes. And there's also standard books about the SHSAT and other tests with some of these tips in it. Even the SHSAT handbook has tips in it, okay? Okay, so in addition to that, you're also going to start looking at the topics you're unaware of. For instance, radicals might be on the SHSAT. Some kids never learned about radicals. They may have learned about square root, but they didn't learn how to like fold, say, the square root of 37 or something like that, or the square root of 51 or something like that. They never learned how to do that. All right, or cube roots even and stuff like that. So there's things like that that you need to go into. So what you're going to do is basically skim a SHSAT workbook or the SHSAT handbook. And by the way, I would not recommend taking the official test until the very end of all this. Okay, so use unofficial sources in the time being. But in the event, you can skim real quick through the SHSAT handbook, see what some of the topics might be. And as you come along, ones that you're not sure about, make a note of them or actually write them down. Okay? And by the way, I'll put a link down below. I have a YouTube that talks about what the math topics normally are and what the ELA topics normally are. The DOE doesn't release that. All they basically say is you need to be proficient in your classroom up through 8th grade in the case of the 8th grade SHSAT, and up through 9th grade in the 9th grade SHSAT. Okay, that's basically all they say. And people, that's not fair. They don't tell us the list. You know what? They don't need to, because there's a huge list there. And in the event, I've done 2 videos, one about the ELA topics and one about the math topics. And what you need to do is go through them and make sure you know every part of every topic. Every part of every topic. So it might just say square root. You need to know everything about square root. All its properties, its identities, how it works, its pathological situations. Pathological situation is like, what's the square root of 9? Most people can say 3. It turns out -3 is also the square root of 9. Well, it may turn out that inside of a word problem on the SHSAT that you were supposed to use the -9 version of it. And if you're not familiar with that, you're getting the wrong answer wrong. There's no question about it. So what you need to do is through a topic list, generate it, write it down yourself. You can use mine as a guide, screenshot and print it out, or if somebody wants it, I can send you a text copy of a list. Okay, and just be aware of what you know and not know. Create a chart, good, bad, whatever. So that's always there before you. Get a notebook that you only keep this kind of stuff in, and then you're going to have that. So what you're going to do is you're going to study a little bit. There's going to be certain topics you're like, I never saw this before in my life. Okay, because they talk about stuff like consecutive integers and I tutored a kid the other day who didn't know what the average was. I don't know how they never knew what average was, but if you need to teach them average, then that's something they need to know and do and be. Okay, so once you've done that, then take a practice test. See, if you take a practice test pretty cold, you're gonna screw it up, and it's informative. But if there's topics that you know that you could brush up on, and topics that you know that you don't know at all, then do those first, and then finally take a practice test. So nobody's saying to do this for months. We're just spend that first week kind of doing that, and then what you want to do is take a practice test and make sure that you're in isolation, that nobody's distracting you, and that you do it in one swoop. Okay, and remember, in the math part, you're not allowed to use a calculator, and you're not going to worry about the timing of it yet. But note the beginning time and the ending time. And if you take a bathroom break, don't take a video game break and all this other stuff too. Make this strictly as if you were taking the test. And like I said earlier, if you have something just before this, like a team practice or just after this, like you're going to Zoom a movie with your friends or something. Don't do it that way. Make sure you're in the right frame of mind to take this practice test. So that's really important. Okay, so that's your week 1. Let me see, where's your week 1? Right there. So you should be able to see that. Okay, so you're going to take the practice test, and now you're going to grade it, and you're going to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. You're going to figure out the things you did good in, and you can figure out the things you did bad in. Everything. Go over everything, every last bit. Okay, you have to. This is important. And you're looking for subtopics out of this. It's not okay that you got 5 out of 6 of the exponent questions right. Why did you get the 6th one wrong? What was unique about that? Even if it was a silly error, you must dig down. You must dig down. Okay? So what you're going to do is use what you learned from week 1 to build on what you're getting out of week 2. Okay? And you're giving yourself basically feedback, biofeedback. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm bad at. And you created a list. You're going to create a list of topics now. Okay? You wrote out your list originally. You're starting to check it off. You may move things from good to bad columns. You may rewrite the list. Okay? This is something you need to actively, purposely do. Don't just leave it to your brain, oh, I screwed up exponents. Write it down. And what you're doing, again, is you're going to analyze why you got something wrong. You also want to analyze why you got something right. There's enough questions you're going to get right that you'll guess that. And there's enough questions that you get right that you were 75 to 95% sure, but you weren't 100% sure. So when you take the test, when you do the practice test, code those so that when you go over the answers, including their explanations, you're not just looking at A, B, C, D here. You're looking at the explanations. Does it jive with what you thought? And if not, learn it. And if you're at a topic like it was about exponent multiplication, don't just look at that. Okay? You're studying right now not for problems. You're not studying problem number 5 and number 30. You're studying right now for topics. If you got an exponent question wrong, then you don't know all you need to know about exponents, independent of question number 5. Because if you got question 5 wrong, there's probably other exponent things that you're going to get wrong too, either for the same reason or a slightly different reason. Remember, they take questions and they tweak them. They tweak them. And they're going to look for those pathological things and other things like that. Okay? Also, in this process, you're going to memorize what you need to memorize. A lot of you guys don't know your formulas. A lot of you guys don't know when to use them. A lot of you guys don't memorize things like identities and properties of things. What does congruent mean, right? What does it mean to multiply a negative by a negative? These are all the rules and stuff you need to know, okay? These are all fundamentals. So this is why when they say you need to know all of the grade 8 material, they're talking about every freaking thing, okay? Every freaking thing. So memorize what you need to memorize. But do note that the SHSAT is not about memorization. The state test is more about that. But even the state test goes a bump above that. The SHSAT is not about rote stuff. It's about using the tools you have, which is the formulas and properties and PEMDAS and all these things like that. It's about using those in a productive way. Okay? So you're going to do that. And you're going to also try to decide what are things I really have major problems with. Because then you kind of want to put everything on pause, learn about that thing, and then finally come back to the test. And that's why you're keeping notes and so on or whatever. So you're going to categorize your problem areas and your non-problem areas. You want to bump up your strengths and you want to bump up your weaknesses. A lot of people like, oh, this is what I have a problem with, that's the only thing to concentrate on. No. Also concentrate on your strengths. Remember, at the end of the day, this is a test. Okay? And a point is a point, no matter where the point comes from. Furthermore, on the SHSAT and some other tests as well, a point is not just a point. On the SHSAT, the number of answers you get correct makes the points per question go higher. So if you got 30 questions right, you might get 5 points each. But if you got 42 questions right, you might be getting 10 points per question at that point. And this doesn't mean question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like that. It's not talking about sequential. It means the total number of questions you got right. Okay, so at this point too, you're going to start going over your list, right? We talked about spending at least 2 hours a day, up to 6 hours a day, things like that. And you're going to start going over your list. You're going to figure out what's of concern and what's of not concern. What's really serious here that you need to figure out and what's not. And you're also going to start figuring out what you need to balance or not. So here's our week 2. You can screenshot that. And again, I still have to decide how to do this. So week 3, what I want you to do is, so you have to juggle all this. This is what part of the problem is. So you need to juggle all this. So what you need to do is focus on your reading comprehension. Okay, so let's just give that the attention it deserves. Okay, so you're gonna focus on something like that. So one of the issues with the reading comprehension is everybody's so centric on the passages, but there's a gotcha with that. The gotcha is you don't get graded on the passages, but you have to read them anyway. So there's a catch-22ish situation there in a lot of ways. Okay, but there's another concern that I have, which is that you're graded also on the reading comprehension part of the question itself and each answer choice. A lot of those require an analysis. And most kids are so focused on the passage when they should be also focused equally on the question and the word choices in the question and the choices and the word choices in the choices. Those are just important. So you not only have to have reading comprehension on the passage, but you have to have on the question and the answers too. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. And a lot of you get so bogged down in trying to memorize the story and all this other stuff. And that's a misdirected focus. Okay? So what you need to start doing is taking a passage one at a time. Just like the math problems. Go through a passage, figure out the questions and answers, and then when you get one wrong, you're going to go deep. And you're going to find out, why did I get this wrong? You're going to torture yourself to figure it. Figure out what category it's from. Is it a vocabulary question? Is it a main idea question? Is it about the tone of the passage? Is it something the author said? Is it figurative language? Even if it's not a poem, it might still be figurative. Is it about a fact in the story? Is it about just anything about author's craft? The setting, the characters, the moral, the theme, the list goes on. The setting, whatever, right? It's just, there's a whole plethora of, there's 100 parts to all this that can be involved in here. That's involved. You need to figure out which it is. Remember that a question can overlap. It could be about the author's point of view and the main idea, and even maybe the tone of the passage all together. So you have to figure that out. That's one of the things with when you get a vocabulary question. It's using the context of the passage. All right. So you need to hone each individual question for what it's really asking you about. Sometimes you can get clues of that from the question itself, like if it says which is the most precise language, and this ties into the language section too, not just the reading comprehension. It's asking you something specific. It's asking something technical, using testing terminology. So you have to choose between whether it's just English phrasing or testing terminology, and it all kind of matters. And again, you want to study topics, not questions. So if you find you got the main idea question wrong a few times, then you need to study about how main idea works. If you're getting a point of view wrong or an inference question wrong a lot of times, then that's something you should concentrate on, work on, and figure out how to get worksheets just about that, okay? Or if you find you're getting just easy questions wrong, then that's something, why is that happening? That's almost like the silly errors in the math part, okay? So you need to do that, and you need to figure that out. So in the process, what you're learning to do is how to approach passages. Instead of looking at this, just this blobs, you do, focus on a passage at a time. Make sure you're all there, okay? And the goal is not to memorize the passage, okay? And I did other videos about main idea and how to approach a passage. So I'm not going to cover that here. So once you start bumping up your reading comprehension game, you're going to go back to your list and either add to it, because you may have realized, oh, I have to worry about author's point of view. I didn't realize that. So that's part of what you need to do here. All right. So there's your week 4. Hopefully that's coming through. So that's your week 3, sorry. So week 4, you're going to kind of do a little table flip here. And you're gonna review your math topics. You're going to go deeper on the reading comprehension. And at the beginning, I didn't kind of mention this, but at the beginning, each week you're going to take a practice test, because you're reviewing your strengths and weaknesses, and you're constantly doing the revision of that list that you created. And you're still not going to worry about timing. You're trying to make sure that you got something right, and that you know why you got it right and why you got it wrong. Those are really huge. And at this point too, you're into week 4. You kind of studied for a number of hours now. You haven't studied an awful lot, but remember, this is on top of everything you learned in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So it's not like this is coming out of outer space. Some of it you may not have saw before, but a lot you should have, right? If you haven't, you may want to make a choice whether to continue or not, to be practical about it. But if you went to a sucky middle school or something, you still have a shot with a month left, and you should pursue it, because at the end of the day, you need to know this stuff for high school, no matter which high school you go to. And if this is going to bump up your game and be more proficient, go for it. So, and I like to look at the whole SHSAT experience and standardized testing experience as just doing a puzzle and having fun, and you're bumping up your game. You're bumping up your game. Okay, hustle, be a hustle and get something better out of yourself, so that you're going to make your life easier in the future, whether you go to specialized high school or not. Okay, and by the way, the specialized high schools are no picnic. You're going to work your butts off when you get there. So you also want to look at the number of questions you guessed on. You're going to keep revising your stuff. And again, it's important to note that you're still studying topics. You're not studying questions. Okay, at the end of the day, the SHSAT is not about question number 5. It's about exponents and commas and, polynomials, whatever. Okay, and you do more of your list. And by now, you should be getting closer to determining what you're strong on and what you're weak on, and that you're going to start breaking it down. So let me show you the week 4 stuff. That there. I'm not sure how well this is coming through, but that's the way it's going to go. So you're at week 5. You're a month in now. Okay, so you should have done enough work, especially if you're consistent, and you should be knowing where you're going, and you should now pretty much have a handle on a lot of parts. Some of the things you were weak in, you should have licked. You should have beaten to death by now at this point, and you should actually be acing many different parts of the test. It also means that you might still be weak in other parts. So again, your goal is to always keep at it. Your goal is to strengthen your strengths, and your goal is always to strengthen your weaknesses. And what I want you to do is consider this a transition week. I said earlier, don't worry about timing and pacing and so on. Start getting concerned about it. At the end of the day, on a lot of tests, there's only about a minute to a minute and a half to answer questions. If you go in 5 and 10 minutes, it's too long. You'll never finish it, which means you'll never meet cutoff scores or minimum scores and stuff like that. So this is something you need to do. You also need to start thinking about the different sections of the test. Am I better at math? Am I better at ELA? On the math, am I better at the grid-ins? Am I better at the geometry? Yada yada. Figure that out. That's important for you to do, because on test day you want to work out a strategy of how you're going to approach the test on test day. Same for the ELA part. It's split into the revising, editing, and the reading comprehension part. But even within each of those, like if you know main idea, then you should know that you know main idea. And if you don't know author's point of view, that's something you need to know. So you're going to work on the different sections and understand that. The same for the revising section A and the revising section B. You might do that. And by the way, that could be part of your strategy. If you always get the revision A sections right, that should be the first part of the test you do. And if you get the paragraph revising editings so-so, then maybe you want to skip to the reading comprehension or the math part. Okay, and then when you get to each section, you're still going to also split it down. So you're going to work out strategies. So this is your week that you learned enough material. There's still a lot to learn, but as you're going, you're also going to start feeding in the test-taking skills, the pacing, your timing, how you're feeling, what the best time of the day to do some of the stuff is, and so on and so on and so on. Test-taking skills, your organization. And by the way, this is important, your organization. So, and you're going to continue working on your list and resolving that. So week 5 doesn't really have a lot more information here. And we're just going to iterate through that each week the same way. So again, you would have taken a practice test in the beginning of week 5 and gone through the same process. So we kind of took a practice test, learned your strengths and weaknesses. You built on it back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. There was a week you concentrated on the reading comprehension. And I'm talking about all ELA as well. There was a week you focused on math. Now you're going to kind of go into blending and a yin-yang back and forth. Of course, if there's still huge topics, you should pursue those, because switching back and forth takes your mind a little bit to figure out. So if you switch back too much back and forth, your mind is kind of huffing and puffing. So be careful with that. Also, in the sense of changing your strategy, you also want to be mimicking the test as much as possible. Make sure you're taking the test. But by this point, hopefully registration happens, and SHSAT day is a go, right? But you want to also be shooting for taking a practice test at the same time that you're scheduled to take the SHSAT for, making sure there's no distractions whatsoever, remembering there's no breaks that you're allowed to take, there's no calculator. And what you also want to do probably at this point is actually use a bubble sheet, because you might get through the test by circling things on the sheet, but you actually could spend 5 or 10 minutes to do your bubble sheet. Also, the grid-ins may not work as naturally as you think it is. And the test day is not the first day you'll want to do that. So the SHSAT handbook has grid-in sheets. Print a few out and start using it. And there's different strategies to do that too. Do I bubble in as I go through each question? Do I bubble in 5 at a time? Do I bubble in a page at a time? Do I bubble in a whole section at a time? There's a whole bunch of ways to do that. So it's up to you guys. But anyway, learn that. Also, your notes, as you took your notes and revised them, you're on week 6 now. So you probably should be closing in on having covered everything you needed to cover. And again, even if this was the 12-week thing instead of 8 weeks, when you're down to that last 25% of your time left or whatever, you should be starting to kind of wrap it up, so to speak, and cleaning up, if you will, right? So here's your week 6. It's not too big, and of course, anything you didn't cover in any other week, you should be doing here as well, all right? Week 7 is pretty tiny too, and it's just basically saying some of the same stuff. Just whatever you couldn't finish in week 6, because at week 7, you're a week before the test, basically, right? So you want to have definitely all huge stuff over with. Any giant thing you were supposed to learn, definitely have learned, all right? I thought these people were coming from me for some reason. And be solid on everything, okay? And you should be feeling comfortable about all this. And again, because you took the time on the questions you couldn't answer, and I'm so serious about finding out why you couldn't get it. You have to do that. Otherwise, you're throwing random darts against the wall. You must pursue why you got something wrong. And it's not about getting 100 on the test. Nobody gets 100 on this test. There's other tests like the SAT that you can get 100 on. There's other tests like the New York State test that you get 100 on. The SHSAT's not necessarily written to get 100 on. It's written to meet a cutoff score. Okay, so there's that. So realize that you may not finish the test, but still meet a cutoff score. You may not know the answer to every question, but still meet a cutoff score. So that's important, because a lot of kids get devastated on that. Oh, I didn't know how to do question 12 and 13. Who cares? If you got all the others right, then you're in, right? So it's about figuring out who you are and working with yourself to get through all these different kind of things like that, okay? On week 8, you're on the final stretch. Okay? So what you're going to do is figure out what the real remaining things are. You should have all your math figured out, all your ELA figured out, your test taking skills, your pacing, any strategies, your organization, little things you may have figured out that you're going to do on test day. You should be having all that. Resolve, I said on week 6 to resolve your major concerns. You should resolve most of your minor concerns by now too. Okay? And make sure that there's still something in your notebook on your topic list that's outstanding. And it could be exponents, but it could also be like, I need to improve my pacing. This is still something you need to figure out and do and bump up your game on. Okay? And there's always ways to do that. And again, if you need to, get external help, especially when you're at the final stretch. And you can do it days before. There's lots of kids that I tutor the week before an exam. There's so much to tell them and inform them about. So it's kind of a great process to get into. So week 8 is the week of the test. You're finally there. You're gonna take a few practice tests now. And by the way, in the week before, from the middle of week 7 to 8, you're going to take a few practice tests. And I normally don't like to give a practice test that you already took over, but especially the earlier ones, like if you took one a week, then you took about 8. Okay, so maybe go back to the first 3, because those you were probably not on your game. You didn't understand the test as well, and yada yada. So maybe go back to the first 3 and retake them completely, as well as any new ones you might want. And by the way, there's kids who have taken 50 practice tests. Totally, sincerely, honestly, that is ridiculous. And it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. And in fact, it's demeaning. Again, I've worked with kids getting through the 8-week stuff. It's possible. And there's kids who do it. Again, there's kids who roll out of the bed. What you also want to be doing this last week, right up to the day of the test, make sure you have your ticket. Get a go bag ready where you have what you need, your ticket, your Metro card, a few extra dollars, your pencils, your erasers. You may want a highlighter, a pack of gum, Tic Tacs. You might be able to bring a candy bar, and it depends on your proctor. Maybe a bottle of water, okay, and things like that. And what you're also doing this last step is that you're prepared. You're a boss. You're going to prepare mentally, and you're going to kick this test butt. Okay? So that's pretty much the 8-week thing here. I tried to get specific and general simultaneously so that this can apply to any test. I don't know everybody's specifics, so I can't get into too low level, because then I might not be talking about you. All right? So, everybody, you have a good 2 months, and if you're watching this a year from now, we're taking the TACHS or the ISEE, the SSAT, or even the PSAT or the SAT. This all works for that, and it's a lot of it's common sense, but a lot of people get all bogged down into it. And if you kind of follow this 8-week thing, you can get there, and again, you can expand and contract it. If it's shorter than 8 weeks, you're getting tight. But again, I've tutored kids within a month, and they're able to do it. All right, everybody. Hopefully, everybody has a great day. It's a beautiful day out, and happy SHSATing.